Inferno, Chapter 1, by Unreasonable Podcast, written by Aaron Cipriani, Donna Owens, and Riker Schlee. Chapter 1, the shining crackle of the fire, the tapping sounds of the shoes making their way towards the big blazing red light, the gasps of neighbors, and the questions of little children whose parents tell them to shush and speedily walk away distraught. The sound of ambulances and police cars slowly moving through the foot traffic of the blank stares, the smell of smoke. It used to remind me of s'mores on a cold fall night. But now, all I can think about is the sobbing. Like a never-ending feeling of pain, it just keeps repeating and reappearing and torturing my mind. It's like my brain is trying to tell me something is off about it. I didn't even think about it when I was there watching it happen. I just sat there on the cold August pavement, staring into the glow, watching more and more people gather. My leg started moving on its own, shaking slightly as I started moving my hands around to get a more accurate description. I was walking back from my first day of second grade. I was so excited to show my parents the little stick figure I had made on our house. I ran down the pavement when I saw the smoke and remembered that they had told me the fire was dangerous. When we had made s'mores or whatever, I would go near the stove. The sad part is, I can't even remember what they looked like. I can't even remember the house. I remembered it being a big blue one with ivy. I love to tell my friends about the ivy. I removed the tree with the swing in the back, but I didn't remember the house, the inside, my old room, the kitchen, nothing. It's like it's gone from my mind. I can't tell whether I'm glad. I got there too late to hear any screaming. I did see the fire engulf the roof as the wooded supports caved in. I can't remember much more, but I know I need to say more to get anything done. My parents were in the house when it burned. The firefighter said that there was a gas leak. My breath got a little shaky. I hadn't noticed it, but the school psychologist looked bewildered. More like a state of shock. I couldn't read her emotions well, but I assumed that she would be. That was the reaction I had been getting for years. I had no idea what was going on. I was too young to process any of it. Mr. Foster. She gave me a slight smile, her eyebrows faint, but she still had that look on her face like she thought she knew something, like she thought she had any idea of what was going through my brain. Are you just saying this to get out of the math test you have next period with Mr. Nelson? I stopped fidgeting. My hands slowly balled up into fists as I took a deep breath and released the tension slowly. No. I was going to continue before being cut off by a quiet whisper and a slightly less quiet scribble of sheet on paper. I knew that type of look from somewhere. It was the I feel like you're lying about something, so let me jot that down real quick look. Do you often try to run from your problems? She said it with a snarky tone. I couldn't tell whether she thought that or was trying to reel a bit of information out of me. No. A single reply slipped out of my mouth. I was going to say something along the lines of no, but I bet you do as you're clearly self-projecting. But I didn't. I couldn't. I definitely wanted to, but my voice felt meek and unimportant. It didn't matter right now, so why defend myself in a losing game? This was common whenever I actually went to talk about my struggles. I never seemed to get my point across the way I wanted to, like a little echo in my head. A distortion, a loss of one's self as it repeated and distorted until all was left was a jumble of emotions and stuttering words tripping over themselves. It was like my mind was in a constant state of unhappiness, and I thought I would move on. I was 7, a child. I had a new family. I hadn't realized it yet, but I was just staring at the social worker in the eyes. I was pretty sure she thought I was crazy, or near crazy. After the fire, everything became a dull, quiet hum. I remember the woman with kind eyes, but a firm grip on my shoulder leading me into a building that smelled like floor polish and boiled vegetables. There were other kids, but we didn't talk about why we were there. It was like a silent, unspoken rule. But I do remember usually staring at the scuff on my newly donated shoes. I would always wonder if the smoky smell would wash out of my clothes. That place was a blur of gray walls and silence. Then one afternoon, they called my name. I was taken to a small, stuffy office. The man and woman sitting across the desk looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. The man, Mr. Miller, they told me, had large, rough hands. that kept clasping and unclasping on his lap. The woman smiled, a quick nervous twitch of the lips. She smelled faintly of mothballs and soap. They didn't ask me questions, not really. They just looked at me like I was a piece of furniture they weren't sure would fit into their house. I remember the sound of a heavy stapler clicking, and then I was walking out behind them, carrying a black trash bag with the few clothes I had left. The car ride was mostly silent, just the hum of the engine and the click of the turn signals. Mrs. Miller tried pointing out a park and a library, but I just watched the houses blur together out the window. Theirs wasn't big or blue. It was a small, tan-colored box at the end of a quiet street, with a lawn so neat it looked like a stiff green carpet. The inside smelled different, not like the polish at the adoption home or the smoke I couldn't forget, but like old paper and something sweet, like cinnamon. They showed me a room at the end of the hall. It was small, with a narrow bed and desk. "This will be yours," Mr. Miller said, his voice too loud for the small place. I just nodded, putting my black bag on the floor and looking at a small crack in the ceiling paint. I blinked, the image of the beige walls and crack in the ceiling dissolving back into the cluttered shelves of the psychologist's office. The smell of cinnamon was gone, replaced by the scent of dry erase markers and stale coffee. I realized I hadn't answered her question. I loosened my fists, my palms damp with sweat. The Millers were good people. They treated me like a glass face that had already been shattered and glued back together, walking on eggshells around me so I wouldn't break again. But living in a house where everyone is afraid to breathe too loud isn't the same as living in a home. "I don't run," I finally said, my voice lower than intended, devoid of the emotion she was digging for. I just learned a long time ago that talking about a fire doesn't unburn the house. The scratching of her pen against the notepad was the only response I got. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound, like a beetle skittering across a dry leaf. She didn't look up immediately, letting the silence stretch out, letting my words hang in the air to see if I'd retract them. When she finally capped the pen, the click echoed in the small room. She glanced at the clock on the wall, the second hand sweeping past the 12 just as the muffled buzz of the school bell vibrated through the floorboards. "We're out of time for today," she said, tearing a yellow slip from a different pad on her desk. She held it out to me, her eyes locking onto mine with persistence that made my skin crawl. "I'm writing you a pass for Mr. Nelson, but don't think this conversation is over. We'll pick this up on Thursday." I snatched the paper, muttering a thanks I didn't mean, and pushed the door open, desperate to trade the suffocating quiet of her office for the deafening roar of the hallway. Mr. Nelson took the yellow slip between two fingers like it was used tissue. He didn't look at me, he didn't nod. He just jerked his chin toward the empty desk in the back row. The room was suffocatingly quiet, save for the frantic scratching of 20 pencils and the aggressive ticking clock above the whiteboard. I slid into the hard plastic seat, the test paper landing in front of me with a slap that sounded like a gunshot in silence. I stared at the page. It might as well have been written in ancient Greek. The numbers and variables swam before my eyes, twisting and turning. Find X. I couldn't even find my own thoughts. The equations blurred, the minus signs stretching out into flat lines, the variables tangling like ivy on a house I couldn't remember. My brain felt heavy, sluggish, still trapped in the smoke of the memory I had just been forced to relive. I gripped my pencil until my knuckles turned white, but the lead didn't touch the paper. I just stared at the question, paralyzed by a fog of confusion that had nothing to do with math. A shadow fell across my desk. I didn't need to look up to know it was him. The smell of peppermint and stale tobacco hit me first. "Problem, Mr. Foster?" Mr. Nelson's voice was a dry, low rasp that carried effortlessly to every corner of the room. The scratching of pencils stopped. Every head turned. I swallowed hard, my throat clicking. I don't understand this part. I haven't studied? He finished the sentence for me, snatching the blank test off my desk. He held it up, inspecting the pristine white sheet as if it were evidence of a crime. Clearly. "It seems you spent your study hall chatting away your problems instead of preparing for your future." "I was with the school psychologist," I muttered, staring at the scruffled marble tires. I had a pass. Mr. Nelson let out a sharp, derisive huff. He leaned down, placing both hands on the front of my desk, trapping me in his space. Let me let you in on a little secret, kid. The world doesn't grade on a curve for feelings. He lowered his voice, but the venom in it was loud enough for the rows nearby to hear. I know your file. I know the tragic backstory, but let's be real for a second. Your parents being dead isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for laziness. They aren't coming back to hold your hand through long division, and frankly, using their memory as an excuse to slack off is pathetic. You want to honor them? Try doing your homework for once. He dropped the test back on the desk. It slid off the edge and fluttered to the floor. Pick it up, he said, turning his back onto me to walk to the front of the room. You have 10 minutes left. Do not waste my time. The bell was a mercy killing. I shoved my books back into my bag, ignoring the paper on the floor, and bolted before Nelson could get another word in. I hit the hallway like a linebacker, shouldering past a group of freshmen, my blood boiling so hot I could barely see straight. Whoa, easy there, Tiger. You're gonna bruise the merchandise. A hand snagged the back of my backpack, pulling me to a gentle halt. I spun around to see James leaning against the lockers, one eyebrow cocked perfectly, a lazy grin plastered on his face. He looked effortlessly put together as always, his hair swooped back and his shirt unbuttoned, just enough to annoy the administration. Nelson, I spat, the name tasting like ash. He's a monster, a literal monster. James gasped, clutching a hand to his chest theatrically. Did he yell at you? Oh, honey, no. Do I need to go in there? I'll cause a scene. I'll cry, I'll throw a stapler. You know I will. It was our thing, the overly affectionate, dramatic couple routine. We've been doing it since middle school to make people uncomfortable, and it had just sort of stuck. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my shoulders dropping an inch. He brought up my parents, James, in front of everyone. James' grin vanished instantly. The playful light in his eyes hardened to something sharp and dangerous. He stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that would have made anyone else back up, but I just leaned into it. He reached out, his fingers brushing a piece of lint off my collar, lingering there for a second longer than necessary. I'm filing for divorce, James muttered, though his voice lacked its usual teasing lilt. His thumb brushed against my collarbone, a touch so soft it sent a weird jolt down my spine. And then, I'm gonna burn the school to the ground. You know I'd catch a charge for you, darling. Just say the word. Don't get arrested on a Tuesday, I said, forcing a weak laugh. It's taco night. James softened, that intense, burning look in his eyes melting back into the character he always played. Before a split second, looking at him this close, I saw something else. He wasn't looking at my eyes, he was looking at my mouth, his expression unguarded and achingly fond. Then, he blinked, and the mask was back. He draped a heavy arm around my shoulders, pulling me to his side as we started walking down the hall. Priorities, Dylan. I like that. Come on, let me walk you back to history. If anyone else looks at you sideways, I'm screaming. I rolled my eyes, grateful for the distraction, completely missing the way James tightened his grip on my shoulder, as if he was terrified that if he'd let go, I'd disappear. The hallway was a river of bodies, students surging towards the cafeteria or their next period, but James navigated it like a captain steering a ship, using his bulk to carve a path for us. He kept his arm firmly around me, effectively shielding me from getting jostled by the freshman stampede. It was grounding, having him there. A solid, warm weight against my side that kept me from floating away into the panic that Nelson had sparked. So, James had said loudly enough to be heard over the slam of lockers, I was thinking we'd skip the cafeteria slop today. I'll treat you to the vending machine. A gourmet meal of stale pretzels and a blue Gatorade. Only the best for my husband. I snorted, adjusting my backpack strap. You're spoiling me. What's the occasion? Did you rob a freshman? Oh, please. I have standards, James scoffed, steering us around a couple making out by the water fountain. He made a large, exaggerated gag noise as we passed them, causing the guy to glare. James just winked at him. I'm just trying to keep your strength up. You look pale, Dill. Paler than usual, which is saying something since you're normally like a Victorian ghost. I'm fine, I lied, though the knot in my stomach was starting to loosen. Liar, James countered effortlessly. He stopped outside the door to my history class, turning to face me. He didn't move his arm right away. His hand lingered on the nape of my neck, his thumb tracing a slow, absent-minded circle against my skin. It was soothing in a way I couldn't quite explain, like a heartbeat. But I'll let it slide because you're pretty when you're rooting. It's very mysterious, very tortured artist. I can't draw, James. Details, details. He finally dropped his hand, sliding it into his pocket, but he didn't step back. He tilted his head, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me feel like I had something on my teeth. Seriously though, if you need me to slash Nelson's tires, I know a guy. It's me. I'm the guy. I'll keep it in mind, I said, managing a real smile this time. Go to class, idiot. Yes, dear, James drawled. He walked backward a few steps, pointing two fingers at his eyes and then me. I'm watching you. Don't let history bore you to death. I'd hate to be a widower at 17. I watched him turn the corner, shaking my head. I didn't see the way his shoulders slumped the second he was out of my sight, or the way he ran frustrated hand through his hair, the playfulness dropping off him like a heavy coat. I just turned and walked into class, grateful that at least one thing in my life, my best friend, was simple and uncomplicated. I got into my next class tired, but relieved. I didn't have to see Nelson again today. Well, until tomorrow anyway. I walked home the same way I did every day, my sneakers scuffing against the cracked sidewalk in a familiar rhythm. Most people hated the trek, complaining about the distance or the weather, but me, it was the only part of the day that actually belonged to me. I liked the solitude. I craved it. Out here, between the suffocating noise of high school and the stifling, cinnamon-scented quiet of the Miller's house, I could just breathe. There was nobody here to bother me, nobody to nag me about my posture or my appetite. Best of all, there was nobody to look at me with those pitying puppy dog eyes and reminding me of my dead parents or force me to take a test that looked like it had been written in a foreign alien language. I fished my tangled earbuds out of my pockets, plucking them in to block out the world. I didn't play music. I didn't want songs about heartbreak or partying. Instead, the soothing, monotone voice of a true crime narrator filled my head, dissecting a cold case from the 90s. It was a habit that had started right after the fire. While other kids watched cartoons to escape, I had become obsessed with crime and mysteries. There was something comforting about it. The idea that even the worst disasters could be analyzed, broken down into clues, and eventually solved. For a long time, I had clung to the idea that I would be a detective one day. I wanted to be the guy who walked into the ashes and found the truth, the one who made sense out of the chaos. But lately, that dream felt like it was dissolving, fading away by the minute like smoke in a strong wind. I kicked the loose pebble into the gutter, thinking about the blank math test and Mr. Nelson's sneer. Detectives were supposed to be smart, sharp, and capable. They didn't fail algebra, they didn't freeze up when people asked them simple questions, and most of all, they don't act like they're in a relationship with their friend. I turned up the volume on the podcast, letting the story of someone else's tragedy drown out the feeling that I was slowly becoming a lost cause. But my walk, like everything else in my life, eventually had to end, and with it, the illusion of safety. It felt like a cruel cosmic joke, or maybe just a testament to the blindness of good intentions. When Dave and Bethany had finalized the adoption, they had made a choice that they thought was poetic, something they probably patted themselves on the back for. They had decided to move into the house directly next door to the empty, overgrown lot where my childhood home used to stand. They had sat me down, smiling that fragile, hopeful smile, and they told me they did it to make me feel closer to home. They thought they were giving me roots, a connection to the parents I had lost. They didn't understand that they weren't moving me closer to home. They were moving me closer to the trauma. Every time I looked out my bedroom window, I didn't see memories of playing in the yard or the ivy on the walls, I saw the ghosts of the flames. I saw the void where my life used to be. Living in the shadow of that scorched earth made even the simplest things feel like a battle. You have no idea how hard it is to watch Dave try to start the backyard grill on a Sunday afternoon, or to stand in the kitchen and click the ignition on the gas stove when the graveyard of your past is sitting 20 feet away watching you. It's like the empty lot has a voice, a low, crackling whisper that drifts over the fence every time a flame sparks to life, saying, "I know about that. I know what fire does." It wasn't comfort, it was a haunting. I kept my eyes fixed on the pavement, treating the sidewalk in front of that empty lot like a tightrope over a canyon. If I didn't look, I wasn't there. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs, until I was safely up the driveway and fumbling with my keys. Passing that patch of scorched earth was a daily trial, a physical hurdle I had to clear just to get to the front door. When the lock finally clicked and I stepped inside, the sudden shift from the heavy, silent dread outside to the aggressive normalcy of the Miller household was almost disorienting. The living room was exactly as I had left it in the morning. Dave was in his natural habitat, slumped deep into the beige leather recliner, bathed in the flickering blue light of the television. He was watching football per usual, and his eyes glazed over as the crowd on the screen roared. He didn't turn around when the door shut. He just raised a hand in vague, automatic wave, completely absorbed in the stats flashing across the bottom of the screen. From the kitchen, a different kind of noise pollution was filtering in. Bethany was on her hands and knees scrubbing at a microscopic smudge on the hardwood floor that only she could see. She was listening to Taylor Swift sing along to the bridge with an enthusiasm that far outworked her voice. Her voice was sharp and somehow consistently flat, drifting in and out of key with a confidence that would have been impressive if it didn't make my teeth ache. It was a picture of parental perfection. The sports, the cleaning, the pop music, so normal it felt like a stage play that I had accidentally wandered into. But I wanted the act to be over and curtain call to happen, so I decided to try and sneak into my room. I tiptoed up the stairs, footsteps as quiet as a mouse as I attempted to sneak to sweet freedom, but unfortunately for me, terror struck. "Dylan, I didn't see you come in. How was your day at school?" The voice pierced the air, sharp enough to cut glass. Ugh, that sound. That sickly sweet, overperformative maternal tone that twisted my stomach into knots tighter than a mall pretzel. She had caught me just as I was making my break for the stairs, my hand hovering inches from the banister that promised escape to the paradise of my room. I froze, then slowly pivoted on my heel, mentally hoisting up the shield that I had been perfecting for 8 long years. It was the good foster kid smile, a strained plastic expression that didn't reach my eyes. It was the same mask I had plastered on for school picture days, for the pity-filled birthday parties, and for every antagonizing conversation with an adoptive mother who treated teenage slang like a second language she was failing to learn. This was, after all, a woman who would look me dead in the eye and say no cap when asking if I wanted peas for dinner, or throw around 6'7" like it was an adjective, seemingly pulling random numbers out of a bingo cage in her head just to sound relevant. I braced myself, tightened the smile, and prepared to endure the cringe. "I'm fine, Beth." I tried to answer the question, but Dave interrupted me, which wasn't much of a surprise. He has a habit of putting his 2 cents into where it doesn't belong. "Hey, what do we talk about, Dill?" Ah, yes, that wretched nickname. Dave came up with it one day, and it just, unfortunately, stuck. I inhaled a sharp inhale and braced myself to say the most dreaded words that had taken my life by storm. "School was good, Mom. Ill. Just ill." Dave and Bethany always liked it when I called them my parents. It would always make them happy and make me feel like my pride went through a meat grinder. It started when I was young, but I knew they weren't my mom and dad, so I never called them my parents. But it makes me puke in my mouth when I go to parent-teacher conference and I have to refer to them as mom and dad. There we go, champ. See, now was that hard? Dave said as he sat up from his recliner chair in the 40-year-old retired dad style, even though he was only 22. And I'm not really religious, but if there is a God, I begged him to let this conversation be over so that I can finally go into my safe haven of a bedroom. We know you're getting older and your teen years are upping your emotions, so if you ever need to talk to us, we're here, Bethany said with a classical, artificial, loving tone. Why was she talking about teenage years? Wasn't she and Dave only 22? Wasn't their teenage years like 4 years ago? They look like they could be siblings. I'll keep that in mind, I said as I walked up to my room, sure to forget 5 minutes later. I put all my stuff on the floor and slumped onto my bed, totally ready to fall asleep, but knowing I can't because if I do, none of my homework would get done. And the last thing I need is Nelson making another comment on my dead parents because question number 7 on the worksheet didn't show any work. So I just tried to push through whilst it feeling like there's a devil on my shoulder, talking about how soft the pillow is or how warm the blankets feel. I pulled the blankets over my shoulders for a moment before realizing that I put my phone down across the room from me. I almost didn't want to move. I just wanted to lay down. As soon as I stood up very quickly to grab my phone, I felt a crushing weight of realization. I had not done my math homework. I wasn't going to do it anyway, but I didn't want to see the condescending look of my Mr. Nelson. As I said, I hadn't done it. My actual phone was currently being held hostage in Bethany's bedside drawer, a casualty of World War III that had broken out in the kitchen earlier that afternoon. But she had made a rookie mistake. She had forgotten about the relic hidden beneath my mattress, my mom's old iPod Touch. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, and the battery drained if you looked at it wrong, but it connected to Wi-Fi, and right now that was all that mattered. I swiped the screen, and there it was, a notification that felt like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating room. A new Call Me Chris video, the mysterious death of Princess Diana. I hadn't been able to watch anything recently, not since the argument. Bethany had cornered me while I was unloading the dishwasher. Her questions started in a cuss before swerving into an interrogation I wasn't ready for. She kept hinting, prodding, and finally just accusing me of being gay, which I'm definitely not. Absolutely 100% not. The accusation had made my blood run hot, a defensive flare that ended with me yelling, her gasping, and me being banished to my room. It took me nearly 2 hours to get through a 20-minute video. Part of it was the ancient professor of my mom's iPod struggling to load, but mostly, I kept pausing. I found myself staring at the frozen image of Chris, lost in thought about how the world could look like a tragedy, like Diana's, and see a conspiracy, a murder plot. It felt weirdly familiar. People trying to find a reason behind a senseless fire, trying to make the pieces fit when they were just broken. Once the video had ended, the silence of the house pressed in on me again. I grabbed my laundry basket from the corner, needing a reason to be out of the room. I crept into the hallway, moving like a ghost. I passed the dark, gaping mouth of the basement staircase, shivering as a draft hit me, reaching for the door to the laundry room. My fingers grazed the silver handle, and I flinched. It was unnaturally cold, biting against my skin. I worked quickly, tossing my clothes into the washer and throwing in a Tide Pod with a practiced flick of the wrist. I slammed the lid shut and started the cycle before Bethany could materialize out of the upside down to criticize me. She hated when I did my own laundry. She constantly hovered, telling me I was doing it the worst possible way, that I was wasting water or ruining fabric. She didn't understand, and I would never tell her that I washed them that way because it was exactly how my parents had taught me. It was a muscle memory from the life that didn't exist anymore, and I wasn't going to let her scrub that away too. I used to attempt to change, maybe fit in with Bethany, but I just couldn't. I didn't want her to become a part of me that I couldn't erase, that I couldn't get rid of no matter how hard I tried. So now I just linger, quietly passing through emotions, waiting for them to stop trying. And eventually, they might give up. It's like they enjoy antagonizing me, but if they want to be crude, downright evil human beings, then I could do the same. For a while, I would hide detergents or food. I would lie about where it had been. They never believed me, but they couldn't prove anything. I was a 15-year-old boy with a goal. I crept back into the kitchen, keeping my footsteps light to avoid alerting the warden. My eyes swept the room, landing on something out of place. A manlia folder, peeking out from the lid of the old wooden bread box tucking under the cabinets. It was weird. Nobody used that box for anything other than expired coupons and dust. I slid toward the refrigerator, trying to get a better look, doing some sort of awkward side shuffle to keep my profile low. My stealth, however, was immediately betrayed by my own clumsiness. I misjudged the distance and slammed my left hip hard against the sharp corner of the kitchen island. I bit my tongue to keep from yelping, freezing in place and waiting for Bethany to shout. But the singing in the other room didn't stop. I rubbed my hip. I reached out to snag the folder. As soon as I flipped it open, the air seemed to leave the room. A cold, heavy stone of dread dropped into my stomach. Paperclipped to the top of the document was a small, square photograph. It was a 4x4 glossy print, the color slightly faded, but unmistakable. It was my father, my mother, and a tiny 4-year-old version of me, grinning through a mouthful of pizza grease under the harsh fluorescent lights of Chuck E. Cheese. My hands started to shake. This wasn't right. This was impossible. We only had one copy of this photo. Just one. I knew for a fact. I remembered seeing it in the night the world ended. It had been hanging in the hallway, encased in a tacky lavender frame that my mom had painstakingly decorated with hot glued seashells. It had been on the wall that I watched collapse into the inferno. It should have been ash. It should have been a memory. So why was it here, without a scorch mark on it, hiding it in the Miller's bread box?